Everyone agrees that what you eat matters. So why do we eat the way that we do?
Beef tallow isn't outdated, it's ancestral technology, and your cells recognize it as real nourishment.
RFK Jr. is pushing back against big pharma and big agriculture, trying to reduce their harmful effects on our health and the environment.
If they want to eat petroleum, they ought to add it themselves at home. But they shouldn't be feeding it to the rest of us.
If you look to social media to try to learn about health food, about nutrition and ingredients and the highly untrustworthy food industry, it is impossible not to run into right-wing propaganda from time to time. The more I analyze the words being used to justify this stuff, the more I realize how connected they are with a much bigger, much darker, and much more ignorant worldview.
High fructose corn syrup, or now they call it corn syrup solids.
They didn't change the name of high fructose corn syrup to corn syrup solids. Those are just two completely different sugars.
From the very beginning of this term, nobody could really define what processing is. Everyone uses the term process just to mean like food I don't like, food that I think is bad.
The MAGA movement, like any fascist movement, primes itself on selling you myths. Nutritionists tell you what you can eat to address your nutritional deficits. Influencers tell you what you can eat so you can be more like them. Maha is a movement about aspiration. Maha influencers use advertisement and lifestyle content to push modern-day propaganda.
This is a special message for anyone still not recorded to Elliot Sang's Patreon.
Sub to Elliot's page now.
Now.
Sub to Elliot's page now.
Now.
Over the past few years, Americans have become even more obsessed with cow stuff.
Don't have a cow, Dad.
Bovines have always played an important role in American culture, dating back to when European settlers imported cows to devastating effect to indigenous ecologies in the early 17th century. But lately it's just been getting ridiculous, right? A recent article from The Atlantic by staff writer Yasmin Tayyag, called "Americans Are All In on Cow-Based Wellness," captures the current trends of the American right. Moisturizer made from cow fat, raw milk, and all the rest. Tayyag covers the busy intersection of food, health, policy, and culture. As MAGA has risen in prominence, she has been busy indeed. Some choice headlines from just this year alone: brace yourself for watery mayo and spiky ice cream. The last days of American orange juice. Eat your vegetables like an adult. America can't stop dieting. Very true. Tayyag's beat is robust. Now that the United States Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is in the White House, there is no shortage of wellness trends and disasters to report on. And yet, at this stage of global crisis and American capitalism, it can be so hard to focus on food. Not unlike how, as people struggling with said crises, we are distracted from the importance of what we eat. It is that exhaustion and distraction that defines our current food landscape. One where easily fact-checked claims about food run rampant on social media. One where grocery prices, despite the promises of politicians, keep skyrocketing. And one where a new brand of fascism, like the old, continues to define people's relationship with their bodies and what goes in them. Take beef tallow as an example. If you're driving down a highway in the American Midwest, where I am, you're likely to come across a billboard from fast food chain Steak 'n Shake promoting their new, sexy, and authentic 100% beef tallow fries. Beef tallow is beef fat. That's all it is. It's fat from beef loins and kidneys rendered into a usable material, a solid, literally saturated fat. The right-wingers' argument, and it usually is right-wingers making this argument, is that beef tallow is, yes, ultimately saturated fat, but it is also a superior alternative to seed oils in the kitchen. Not an official scientific term, seed oils is a term that has become popular of recent to define basically 6 different oils: peanut, canola, I'm forgetting the rest of them off the top of my head. Put them on screen, Danae. Anyway, their point is whenever you're frying anything, you should use tallow instead.
Man, people are still scared of beef tallow, but cooking their eggs in canola oil like it's heart healthy. Now let's talk tallow. High in saturated fats like stearic acid, clean, stable, it doesn't oxidize. It's a good dose of oleic acid, same as monounsaturated fat and olive oil. It contains conjugated linoleic acid, CLAs, which may reduce tumor growth and support fat metabolism. It's literally what your great-grandparents used before Big Pharma convinced everyone that oil from a genetically modified seed doused in hexane was somehow better.
Hexane is a colorless liquid used to extract oil from seeds, and it's only particularly harmful when you're exposed to it in gas form, and it evaporates out through light heating once the oils are extracted, so any amount of it in seed oils is extremely trace. Also, the form it's used in to extract oils is far less of a neurotoxic risk than the form it takes in gasoline, so you're much more likely to have high and harmful hexane exposure if you are around gas a lot, like maybe if you pump unleaded gas all the time. Anyway,
beef tallow isn't outdated, it's ancestral technology, and your cells recognize it as real nourishment. It's time to ditch the plastic bottles and go back to real fat. Your mitochondria will thank you.
This is not a fact check. I just want to say, yuck. That thing looks gross. Now, I don't know why olive oil gets so marginalized and oppressed in this conversation, but there are various parts of this argument that are inoffensive. Tallow is not bereft of health benefits. It does have some essential vitamins, like many other foods, but it is literally saturated fat, and is thus so much higher in saturated fat than any vegetable oils that having it on a regular basis will likely spike your cholesterol and thus put you at increasing risk of heart disease and stroke. Okay, so one of the first counter arguments that you will receive here is that the nature of the saturated fat in tallow is substantively different than in other sources. This is technically true. All saturated fats, like all materials, have different compositions depending on where they came from, but it doesn't make a big nutritional difference at all. Stearic acid is generally more present in animal fats and has a much lower negative effect on cholesterol than, say, palmitic acid, the most commonly consumed saturated fatty acid. And yes, a decent percentage of the saturated fat in tallow is stearic acid, but it is still mostly palmitic acid. Around 43% of beef tallow is saturated fatty acid. Compare this to avocado oil, which is around 12% saturated fatty acid. Even if, and that's a big if, the composition of that saturated fatty acid is a far higher percentage of palmitic acid, you will still get way more palmitic acid from tallow. And yeah, that's not the case, so there you go. From here, the conversation gets more and more in the weeds. A central contention that tallow stands make is that, yes, tallow has way more saturated fat, and vegetable oils are made up of much more polyunsaturated fatty acid, which the nutrition community commonly refers to as good fats, namely omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, which have been shown to lower risk of heart attacks, among other things. But what if they're actually not so good? The main concern cited is inflammation, namely that omega-6 fatty acid contains linoleic acid, which breaks down in the body and turns into arachidonic acid, which can cause inflammation. Now, a certain amount of inflammation is good, but too much of it affects all type of health processes, including in your brain.
Let's talk real numbers and real biology. Grass-fed beef tallow is only 4% omega-6, mostly as linoleic acid. Compare that to corn oil, 59%, sunflower oil, 70%, soybean oil, 50%, canola oil, 20%. It's small amounts, it's fine. Inflammation is part of healing. But when you're overdosing on linoleic acid daily, your body stays in a state of chronic, low-grade inflammation. That's the breeding ground for heart disease, metabolic dysfunction, insulin resistance, autoimmune issues, anxiety, and even neural inflammation. And worse, linoleic acid is highly unstable. When heated, like in frying, like most places, it oxidizes, producing a toxic byproduct like aldehydes and 4-HNE, which damage DNA, mitochondria, and cell membranes.
However, omega-6 fatty acids do have significant health benefits, and you should not aim to reduce them except for in extreme cases. Instead, one thing you can do is try to balance them with omega-3s, which will limit that conversion process, the aforementioned one. So is tallow higher in omega-3s than seed oils? No. Duh, it's lower in both omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. It just has far less of the omega-6s because it's far lower in polyunsaturated fat. Additionally, omega-6s from animal fats can often become inflammatory far faster than those found in plant fats. So the argument for beef tallow being healthier because it is anti-inflammatory is essentially one that argues we should reduce the health benefits for our skin and cholesterol in omega-6s. Oh, and also, the science of that, the linoleic acid into arachidonic acid, Not so simple. In fact, there are some processes by which arachidonic acid can be converted into anti-inflammatory molecules, and also linoleic acid barely breaks down into arachidonic acid in the first place.
You look at the evidence, they just aren't bad. They're literally leading to better health outcomes.
My name is Peyton Nelson, and I'm studying food and nutrition at the same university he graduated at.
No offense, but you're in the middle of your undergrad at the university where I got both my bachelor's and my master's degree in nutrition and dietetics.
Seed oils are rich in polyunsaturated fats, which are not intrinsically bad, but are chemically unstable. During high heat processing and cooking, they are prone to oxidation. This creates oxidized lipids, which generate reactive oxygen species.
This is true. When they're repeatedly heated to high temperatures, like during deep frying, the quality gets worse. But is that really the fault of the seed oil, or is that more just using it improperly? If your entire argument against seed oils is that you shouldn't be eating a ton of deep fried food, then congrats, you're on the same page as everyone else. Eating deep fried food every day is unhealthy, but no one's saying you should be doing that. Whenever you're trying to look into something that's been studied hundreds or even thousands of times, there are certain types of research that you should look at, and these are called outcome studies, and this is why. Because you might look at these smaller studies and think, well, certain oils are more unstable, which can lead to oxidative stress, which can cause inflammation, which can then cause chronic disease, so therefore seed oils must be causing chronic disease. But this is missing the forest for the trees, because we can look at what actually happens when people eat seed oils. Because we have hundreds of human outcome studies. And when we look at the actual human outcome data, we find that the unsaturated fats in seed oils do not lead to increased inflammation in any notable or significant way. That a lack of unsaturated fats in the diet might contribute to heart disease development. That the fats in seed oils can be involved in inflammatory pathways, but they can also be involved in anti-inflammatory pathways. And that omega-6 unsaturated fat intake is associated with less heart disease risk, less inflammation, and lower cholesterol. So while it can be good to look at these smaller cellular and mechanistic studies, you always have to place priority on actual human outcome studies. There's a reason we have a hierarchy of evidence, and that randomized controlled trials, meta-analyses, and systematic reviews are on top. And look, when I was as far along in my degree as you are, I was against seed oils. I wouldn't eat anything that had them, and I was borderline carnivore. But my mind was changed when I actually looked into the research and stopped listening to people who were educating me on social media. So don't be afraid of seed oils, but if you care for your health, you should probably also not be eating a ton of ultra-processed or deep-fried foods.
Okay, I've gone too deep here. My point is, this is not exactly convincing me that I should start shoving more saturated fat into my body, given the evidence that it'll give me heart disease. A far more convincing argument would be, saturated fat tastes good. Just show me the fries or the onion rings, and I'll be like, fair point. I actually think I want those. And yeah, as a matter of fact, a lot of people just say they started using beef tallow because they like how it makes their food taste. And while I'll personally pass because I don't want to add even more junk into my diet, I at least understand the reasoning. The problem is that said reasoning suggests that these people, these buff, angry internet people, are actually responding to their own desires. That they do some things because they like those things, not because it's good for humanity or natural or whatever. And they can't admit that because that wouldn't be very Christian. I mean, that wouldn't be very healthy. Frankly, I could dig into more of the science-based discourse, but the more I analyze the words being used to justify this stuff, the more I realize how connected they are with a much bigger, much darker, and a much more ignorant worldview. As usual, a comment from a Redditor sounds alarm bells for me. So, remember olive oil? I mentioned it being marginalized earlier in this conversation. Someone brought it up, as well as avocado oil, in one of these subreddits. This person says, yeah, olive and avocado are food oils. They still have a bit of omega-6, just not even close to the levels of seed oils. 3 other concerns, though. These oils can be cut with seed oils. They have a lot of phytocholesterol and can have high levels of phthalate contamination. I personally will always choose tallow/ghee over avocado/olive. More nutrients, less concern. If you're gonna go with avocado, know the source well. And hopefully it's your neighbor who squeezes them by hand. Okay, so at first glance, besides the whole beef tallow has more nutrients thing and the omega-6 thing that we went over, this seems like a reasonable argument, right? You don't know exactly what they put in that avocado oil. You don't know where these avocados came from. Don't trust these big scammy companies. But then you remember that this point is being made to argue that you should buy beef tallow and ghee instead. Now, if you have an issue with transparency, what kind of materials are used in the process of extracting your food products, I have really bad news for you about products that come from cows. I have really bad news for you about what kind of processes happen within those cows that create this tallow. Basically, this stuff is full of things you wouldn't like. For instance, cows are made to eat grain and soybean, which is really bad for their digestion, in order to plump them up quickly before being slaughtered. Their feed is often filled with antibiotics, stuff called tetracyclines and macrolides, especially in the US, whether they are sick or not, as a cheat to avoid sickness spreading in the herd. This industrially produced beef, common especially for lower budget eating, is arguably just as processed, if not more so, than any seed oil, because the cow is treated as a machine. And before you say, well, that's why I always get grass-fed beef instead, aside from the higher price tag, this label is practically unenforceable by the FDA, and the food market is rife with products labeled grass-fed that are in fact hardly distinguishable from the norm. You'll want to check for third-party independent certification, namely from an organization like the Food Alliance. And none of that covers the disastrous environmental impact of any industrial cattle farming. If there's anything you should be buying directly from a farmer you trust, it's meat. Indeed, the food industry and the climate change it necessitates is a depressing subject, one that encompasses everything from sick animals to drought-stricken soils. Now, such soils were actually the subject of a more encouraging bit of content, a recent video by Planet Wild, which examines a technique used by the Maasai tribe in Kenya to help restore their landscapes. And that brings us to today's ad. Planet Wild is a community-based nature protection organization. It's kind of like crowdfunding for nature. Every month, over 10,000 members of Planet Wild fund a new, carefully selected project. These projects include bringing back endangered species, protecting our oceans, or restoring forests. They'll show you videos on a monthly basis so you can see the impact with your own eyes, as well as text reports and badges that can show you the community's impact and help you understand what projects you're supporting. Now, if you want to be one of the thousands that helps contribute to Planet Wild's projects making a difference with nature, consider joining. You can give whatever amount, big or small, that feels right to you. Every dollar counts in protecting nature. So here's a special gift. Please listen closely. The first 100 people to use my code Elliot9 will get their first month free. To claim your first free month, scan this QR code or click the link in the description. And what's great about this is you can see the results that are coming from your contributions. No catch, you can cancel at any time, no questions asked. So thanks to Planet Wild for sponsoring this video. Their video will be linked at the end of this one. Sponsors help keep this channel running, as do my wonderful patrons. On Patreon, I post conversations with creators like FD Signifier and Zoe B, and channel members get access to live streams as soon as I finish them. In full, no editing. Anyway, it's clear that the American right wing is still disinterested in combating climate change, where they acknowledge it at all, or don't attribute it to conspiracy theories. What they're really thinking about with their food is how much they want to eat animal stuff. A recent episode of the Maintenance Phase podcast, covering the anti-seed oil movement, ties the early popularization of seed oil discourse to the popularization of the carnivore diet. The carnivore diet was the late 2010s predecessor of today's Maha food trend landscape, still visible in the movement's prioritization of eating meat or animal products. Essentially, people espoused a passion for eating animal stuff and how good it is for your body, including people like Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, and bizarre influencers like the Liver King. They attributed their passion to all manner of bad nutrition information, but the real reason for the diet's popularity has much more to do with anger toward left-leaning ideologies. As the previously cited Redditor said in a separate thread, vegans put politics and ideals and emotions before health and nutrition, ignoring that humans lived as either carnivores or omnivores for 2 million years. This is misleading, of course. Archaeological research increasingly indicates that many early humans ate mostly plant-based diets, especially in the Americas. After the development of agriculture 12,000 years ago, many ate plant-based diets for spiritual practices, as in the Indus Valley Civilization, but for the most part throughout history, what you eat has not been an ideological choice one way or the other. Up until today's tightly wound, high-tech, environmentally destructive global food chain, which still makes use of highly exploitative labor of poor people in the global south, of course, people ate what they had around them. Once farming was created, you farmed what was in season, and you stored meat through several processes to eat over long periods of time. You weren't going out and hand-selecting tallow from a few dozen cows, hamburger meat from a few dozen others, and then sauces and seasonings processed and picked around the country every time you made lunch. Make no mistake, whether you eat meat or not, your diet today has little to no resemblance to the eating habits of your ancestors, and that goes for most everyone around the world. But none of that matters. Conservatives revere the past precisely because they misunderstand it. There was no period where America was this happy and sunny place for everyone. There was no period where we all got along. There was no period where we all ate meat all the time before modern capitalism, especially not steak and burgers. And there was no period where cultures stayed separate and migration was repelled and women were always women and men were always men. The MAGA movement, like any fascist movement, primes itself on selling you myths. In the case of the Maha movement, it sells you these myths by hijacking the wellness industrial complex. The US, and to some extent the rest of the world, has long been obsessed with diets and health trends. Corporations seize on your desire for real connection, love, freedom of movement, beauty, and wonder by manufacturing short cycles of obsession over products that they can sell you. In order to culturally normalize and empower the right wing, its ideologies focus on taking that industrial complex and pushing it as hard as possible toward conservative ideals. Genes are passed down from parents to offspring. Hitler and Mussolini co-opted film and music stars and promoted art that magnified their ideals. But in today's globalized digital landscape, it'll take more than flattering Republican actresses like Sydney Sweeney and brands like American Eagle to cement this shift. Everyone knows that this world runs on influencers.
Are you shopping for cooking oils at Costco?
This is Care by Kara. This is what Care by Kara does. She do spin, she do jump, she do more spin, and then she gives you suggestions of what organic foods to get. Sometimes the advice is fairly innocuous. Here's how to make healthier pancakes from a box. Use a brand that says organic on it. Slice up a fruit. Here are some healthier brands of potato chips. And then sometimes she decides to really let it rip. Like in this reel from May, when she decides to tell us about propaganda she's not falling for. Sun causes cancer, birth control, alcohol, politics, fluoride, vitamin A, the dairy industry. She cooked with that one. Natural disasters, with natural in quotes. All or nothing mindset. Drinking out of aluminum cans? Better than glass. So what is there to say here, really? You can joke about the syntax that makes it sound like she thinks alcohol and politics simply don't exist. You can joke about the escalating absurdity of almost every claim. But what really gets me here is seeing comments like these. Major bummer. I loved hearing about your healthy food options. The truth is, Care by Kara has over 200,000 Instagram followers. Her top comments tend to be trolls and critics, but she seems to have at least somewhat of a reach as a holistic food influencer. A lot of the shit she takes is based on her appearance or the bizarre dances she does. But for the most part, she's just a young woman who seems to care about sharing food ideas, about going against the grain and promoting a healthy diet. And that's what makes the Maha influencer space kind of tragic. If you look to social media to try to learn about health food, about nutrition and ingredients and the highly untrustworthy food industry, it is impossible not to run into right-wing propaganda from time to time. Care by Kara is the exception. Her reach is relatively small, and a lot of the engagement she gets is ironic at this point. I'd say the Maha influencer space would prefer you look away from Care by Kara, because Care by Kara fails at looking normal, palatable, ideal. She's not even blonde. Tragedy. No, the real heavy hitters of this space are much more homogenized in their appearance and conscious of that. You might have someone like Real Foodology, who in between rallying against seed oils and advising that you feed your baby raw milk instead of evil baby formula, will also dabble in spreading propaganda about undocumented immigrants using SNAP. They don't, they can't, the dangers of all vaccines, and the health benefits of nicotine. To be honest, I didn't see that one coming either. I don't know how, but they just keep surprising me. These are the most caricaturish figures at the baseline of Maha acceptability. The types of women telling you not to consume chemicals while they constantly expose themselves to cosmetic chemicals. I don't want to overstep here, but hair dye, fillers, Botox, nothing wrong with looking how you want to look, but it's not exactly the picture of all natural living. But if you're really getting at the heart of Maha influencer world, you're not going to be talking about rebel nutritionists and aggressive vaccine denialists at all. Those people have niches, they're easy to categorize, and they don't win arguments. They exist more so to create spaces in which right-wingers can congregate and decide what food companies they should throw money at. They're a straightforward part of the pipeline. Maha influencer world truly makes an impact through its more innocuous parts, through pretty women who hardly talk to you at all, instead modeling for you a life that all of the conservative parts of your brain hunger to achieve. For many people, that pipeline starts with tradwife content. You're scrolling down your untrained TikTok FYP, and there she is, Hannah Nealman, the face of Ballerina Farm. Nealman is an influencer through and through. She doesn't make Instagram slides proselytizing about the good bacteria you get rid of when you pasteurize milk. She just shows you experiences, feeding her 8 kids milk right out of the udder of a cow named Tulip, looking all creamy and white. Of course, this is a bad idea. Though unpasteurized milk is not always going to give you side effects or food poisoning, the risks are especially dangerous for small children.
How bad is it to get sick from raw milk? You sure you want to get into it here because it's gross and we're in a grocery store? Okay, all right. Okay, so the outbreak that's going on right now? Yeah. There's a couple different bacteria going on in this outbreak here. One of them rips up your intestinal lining. It gets into your bloodstream and starts shredding your kidneys. Since your intestines are low-key dissolving now, the diarrhea is now full of blood. So that's why people are winding up in the hospital, huh? Yeah. They're at least getting better now, right? Mostly. Folks forget this now, but it was very, very normal and trained in home ec classes that as the mom, you should boil the milk. If you have a family cow, you milk it, you boil the milk, and then you serve it to your family. I cannot stress how much of a big deal this was. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was understood that this is just what you do. That's how you use milk. During the times when I have lived and worked with farmers in very remote areas and very poor areas that are less developed, the moms just ran themselves ragged, just keeping things clean. It's like a thing that we like to do now, and like complain about how people these days have it too soft, but I think we really don't understand how much women work themselves to the bone, not to make money, not to like have nice things, but just to stay clean so their families didn't die. You know, kids who kind of grew up ignoring women's work because that's what we do, and then, you know, like generations, decades later, they're telling everybody, we didn't do that. Your mom worked so hard to do that. Your mom worked so hard to boil the milk, to chop the wood, not only milk the cow, but like light a fire, tend a fire. You gotta warm that stuff up enough that it boils and kills the bacteria.
But her content doesn't engage you in terms of science or health at all. The conversation it has with its audience is simple. It is about marketing a lifestyle untainted by modernity. The point is to look wholesome, and it takes a lot of work to do so. Animals are obviously dirty, and if you saw what a cow udder looked like up close, you would be reticent to drink anything directly from one. And it also takes work to edit videos that don't include the 60 employees you have on your farm, including the multiple chefs. Of course, affording such a farm in the first place requires a lot of capital, let alone all these employees and amenities like a home gym. And that's when it helps that your husband is the son of the founder of JetBlue, as well as 4 other airways. It's clear that Ballerina Farm is the vanity project of 2 rich Mormons, capturing a natural lifestyle that is anything but. They don't even have the time or energy to consistently do what their videos show them doing, let alone would any average mother in America who they are influencing. But that's clearly not the point. The point is most clearly illustrated by the comment sections of her recent posts. ¿Quién en su sano juicio la critica? Está viviendo el sueño. These people cultivate stands. That's what they do. Folks from even outside of the United States look to them for inspiration, idolize them, and clap back at their haters. Nutritionists tell you what you can eat to address your nutritional deficits, to help your body do what you want or need it to do. Influencers tell you what you can eat so you can be more like them. Maha is a movement about aspiration. It is a movement about aesthetics. Maha influencers use advertisement and lifestyle content to push modern-day propaganda.
Join the army! Serve your nation! I'm doing my part. I'm doing my part.
Hey y'all, just thought I would share my routine for maximizing productivity. Every day I get up at 5 a.m. and then make my bed immediately. I haven't slacked on this even once. I then meditate for about 2 hours just to really ground myself. It's your own fault if you're mentally ill. I follow this with a hearty breakfast of a solitary cherry tomato. It's your fault if you're fat.
The food dye stuff is a great example.
And I said, if they want to add petroleum They want to eat petroleum. They ought to add it themselves at home. But they shouldn't be feeding it to the rest of us. And
there's a viral video of an alleged mom removing the dye from Skittles by running them underwater for a while. I can't source the original, and so I don't know what her point was. I'm a great journalist. But it kind of just gets at the problem in a pretty raw way, doesn't it? Like, the problem with Skittles is hardly the food dye, which makes up so little of its composition. It's the sugar, the addictiveness, the utter lack of nutritional value. I thought we all agreed years ago that there's no way to healthify junk food. If you're eating French fries or a cheeseburger, whether or not you cook them with tallow or peanut oil, you're not eating something healthy. But the conservative approach to food is one of embracing impossibility. To do what is impossible. Why? Because to do what is impossible makes you superior to others. It grants you access to understandings and intelligence and ways of being that lesser mortals simply cannot access. To make your French fries extra beefy by using expensive tallow as a statement of your own imperviousness to the dangers of saturated fats, to the destructive nature of the cattle ranching industry. Eating regular Skittles and cooking with regular seed oils makes you the same as poor people. And that's bad. It's an exhausting reality wherein you have to prove you are better and are doing better than other people at all times. It's a reality bereft of enjoyment, stuffed to the brim with performance, constantly looking at a past that, even if it ever existed, which it didn't, can never come back. It is the obsession with living the dream as a concept, and not as a phrase with any meaning. You do all this shit just so people can praise you for living the dream, and you're miserable. You're miserable because it's not even your dream. Hannah Nealman of Ballerina Farm wanted to be a ballerina. In a now infamous feature with The Times, journalist Megan Agnew examines the rigorous physical existence of Nealman as a mother of 8, performing in beauty pageant competitions 12 days postpartum, barely having stopped bleeding and swelling by the time she reached the stage. Agnew details the ways in which Nealman, a Juilliard-trained ballerina, capitulated her whole lifestyle to become the Mormon tradwife ideal. Was this what she always wanted? I ask when we get a moment alone while Daniel checks on the animals. No, she says. She pauses. My goal was New York City. I left home at 17 and I was so excited to get there. I just loved that energy. And I was gonna be a ballerina. I was a good ballerina. She pauses again. But I knew that when I started to have kids, my life would start to look different. Agnew notes how often Hannah is cut off by her trust fund husband, how constantly her possessions and desires throughout her life have been sidelined, how engulfed she has become in the Christian ideal, the many kids, the rich family, the big brand. What becomes obvious is the dream is something very different from any one person's aspirations. When blonde bombshells show up on Fox News to explain to you how baby formula is full of harmful chemicals, the point is not to engage you in an educational conversation. The point is not that you ask why they are claiming high fructose corn syrup is the same thing as corn syrup solids, when those are two different things. The point is not that you actually debate whether or not cane sugar is any healthier for the body than high fructose corn syrup. It is not. The point is clearly demonstrated by an examination of the qualifications the network lists for these analysts. Texas mom. The Christian fundamentalist ideal of being a mom is what matters here. It is the goal to which the good American citizen aspires. You are not being educated. You are being sold a lifestyle.
ADHD, the neurological disorders, ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, and autism. All of these are injuries that I never heard of when I was a kid. They were not part of the nomenclature. That were just unknown when I was a kid. I never knew anybody with a peanut allergy. Treating chronic disease when my uncle was president, today it's about $1.8 trillion annually. Is bankrupting our nation. 74% of American kids cannot qualify for military service. Oh, how are we going to maintain our global leadership?
The current United States Secretary of Health and Human Services says the COVID vaccine is dangerous and wants to ban it. The current nominee for Surgeon General is not a doctor and thinks you should discern whether to drink raw milk from a cow by petting it and looking its farmer in the eyes. Things are very bad. But when it comes to actual policy implementation, we see that they struggle to find ways, oftentimes, to actually act on many of their stated beliefs. For example, getting rid of industrial food dyes is frankly an impossible task. Sometimes the Maha crowd will hand wave in the direction of Europe, saying that they don't use food dyes over there like we do, a classic bit of classist Eurocentrism that ignores the reality. Europe uses almost all of the same food dyes as we do, just with different names. Consider for a second just how much turmeric you would possibly need for every single food item colored yellow, and where you could possibly get reliable food coloring. Get rid of food coloring in all items entirely then? Okay, sure. Sounds like something that none of these multinational food companies would agree to, but even if they did, of course, the nutritional quality of the food would be just about exactly the same. RFK Jr. has long rallied against the dangers of ultra-processed foods, but there is no reliable way to classify what an ultra-processed food is or not. Attempts to do so in scholarly literature break down quite easily when held up to scrutiny, as demonstrated by an episode of the podcast Maintenance Phase. Like honey has been put in like every single category on the processed foods scale.
From the very beginning of this term, nobody could really define what processing is, because one way to think about it is like, okay, you're processing the wheat, you're taking out all the nutrients, but also boiling down foods to get the nutrients out and turning them into powders and putting them into bread is also processing. It's arguably
100%.
more processing.
Yeah.
This is just a different kind of processing. So it's like everyone uses the term process just to mean like food I don't like, food that I think is bad.
Like, there are very few definitions of processed foods in terms of the like colloquial usage that would include like olive oil.
So I found an article on all of the ways that they had to change the definition of this term over time. Between 2009 and 2017, they changed the definition of ultra-processed foods 7 times.
Yeah, that tracks.
And so in 2010, the definition of ultra-processed foods is updated to durable, accessible, convenient, and palatable, ready-to-eat or ready-to-heat food products liable to be consumed as snacks or desserts or to replace home-prepared dishes.
I like that they keep throwing in highly palatable, which is just like, if it tastes good, it's one of these.
But like, do you know what else is ready to eat? A fucking apple?
For the most part, the Trump administration will do with food what they have done with everything else. They gesture at big measures and then sometimes half-assedly start them before throwing them away. Some of these things, like a COVID vaccine ban, seems possible enough to me, and also very scary. But a lot of people aren't even getting vaccinated in the first place because of their successful misinformation campaigns, and more so, the lack of affordability in this kind of healthcare system. This is not downplaying, this is just examining the reality. What I'm trying to say is that their only consistent policy is austerity. Do less for citizens. Spend less on citizens. And this is not because of their ideological convictions or because of failed economic policy ideas. It is because austerity is the main objective of fascism. In the book The Capital Order, economist Clara Mattei notes how the temporarily centralized, organized economies of European governments during the First World War officially broke the myth of capitalism being ideal. Reversion to the usual capitalist exploitation systems was thus undermined greatly by socialist and communist movements emboldened by these essentially socialist wartime experiments. In order to get things back in order, to keep the poor from getting richer and the rich from getting poorer, people in power needed a new weapon. Economists gave them just what they needed: austerity. Austerity is based on a simple principle, as Mattei puts it: work more, consume less. Austerity cuts social welfare budgets, bolstering regressive taxation that takes more from the poor than the rich. It does exactly the opposite of what we're taught good economies do. It intentionally makes the economy illiquid, making it harder and harder for the average consumer to spend. The key principles espoused were of removing state interference with the economy. This economic policy was central to the OG fascism of Benito Mussolini. When Il Duce gave his first speech in Parliament after storming the Capitol and successfully intimidating the center-right to concede, would never happen in the US now. He espoused the principles that would drive domestic policy: thrift, work, discipline. Folks, a government that promotes how tough and disciplined its citizens should be is a government ready to kill its citizens. Social reforms and wartime economic structures were destroyed. To the liberal establishment fully focused on fighting socialism, this was great. Mattei writes, Liberal experts in Italy, Britain, and the United States were quick in observing that a central strongman with full powers was the most effective means of safeguarding Italian capitalism from its multifaceted enemies. Beyond the basics of austerity stuff, Mussolini's regime overlaps with today's American fascism in another way, an emphasis on shaping the politics of food. Mussolini's battle for grain saw the state push for wheat production to increase significantly in Italy in order to reduce import dependency. To this day, Italy imports a ton of wheat to make its famous pasta, at the time mostly from Turkey, today mostly from Canada and other European powers. To combat this, Mussolini placed high tariffs on wheat imports and subsidized Italian farmers handsomely to upgrade materials and infrastructure and begin growing a huge amount of wheat. It worked to a degree. Italy became fairly self-sufficient at wheat production, but it did little to change the nation's overall dependency on imports for food. And really, it did little to change hunger. The movement also shaped one of Mussolini's most notorious points of emphasis. Mussolini promoted the consumption of rice over the consumption of pasta. In Italy, as Jenny Long writes for The Fed, the regime promoted a simple and calorically stringent diet entirely based on domestic produce, citrus fruits, tomatoes, olive oil, wine, and of course, rice. Promoting the domestic production and consumption of rice while discouraging imports of flour for pasta turned fascist Italy into a pro-rice and anti-pasta state at once. Another significant effect of the emphasis on rice was the emphasis on women's work. Mondine, or female rice paddy farmers, became a prominent part of Italian agriculture in the late 19th century. They were poor women workers from places like Lombardy, Lombardia, and Piedmont, Piemonte. As Diana Garvin writes in her book Feeding Fascism, The Politics of Women's Food Work, the mondine, female rice weeders, worked the region's rice paddies, their arms and legs deep in the mud, backspent for 8 hours each day during the 40-day monda, the summer rice weeding season. Famously depicted in the 1949 film Bitter Rice, these women often had progressive socialist views, befitting their place in class struggle. It was their grossly underpaid, unprotected labor that helped make rice cultivation so prominent and cost-efficient in Italy. The fascists ensured that the fruits of their labor would be championed, but not so much the labor itself. As Long writes, propaganda campaigns targeting women capitalized on their pride as mothers and wives of present and future fascist fighters. The campaigns encouraged and offered rewards for state loyalty and reliance. To eat rice was to eat for the regime. State trucks traveled the countryside to distribute rice to women at fascist rallies, particularly in southern Italy, where they also brought pamphlets containing not just recipes and nutritional information, but powerful propaganda. But Italian women, especially poorer women devastated by the economic realities of the late 20s and 30s and the fascist fear of imports, were incensed by having rice and nothing else to eat. In the South, pasta was much preferred, with forced rice consumption associated with bitter memories of World War I. In the North were the mondine, who organized strikes, protests, and communist cells. They sang songs of resistance as they toiled in the fields. It is said that the famous anti-fascist song Bella Ciao was invented here, with the mondine. Today, the US produces cow products more than any other food commodity: beef, dairy, butter. And at least one of its other more produced food commodities, corn, is mostly not produced for human consumption. Around 40% of it is used for ethanol. Around 36% of it is used for animal feed. Most of those animals? As Jonathan Foley writes for Scientific American, only a tiny fraction of the national corn crop is directly used for food for Americans, much of that for high fructose corn syrup, the good stuff. Multiple stretches of America have such land diversity that they can produce all number of things. I was shocked moving from New York to Michigan, because here, your average grocery store might have everything from locally grown bok choy to red cabbage. And if you don't grow blueberries in your backyard that you can pick and eat yourself, you probably know some people who do. But the vast majority of our landscape is devoted to big cow, an industry that spends tons of money to continuously embed itself in our culture. Climate Town's video, Dairy is Milking America Dry, reveals to us the absurdity of the past half-century of dairy consumption. Mass marketing campaigns, from the Got Milk ads to the proliferation of extra cheesy food items, are all the result of a massive push by the dairy industry, which has long pushed misinformation about the nutritional qualities of milk and cheese. And as climate change demands that the world reduce its meat consumption significantly and causes droughts in several parts of the US that continue to trouble cattle ranchers, the beef industry has gone full force in promoting propaganda about the necessity of beef in the diet, the nutritional value of beef, and the sustainability of beef production in the United States. What we see now as the cow craziness of Maha, the stuff in the Atlantic article from our introduction, the beef tallow moisturizers and frying oils, the raw milk trends, the raw cow organ meat fandoms, the bovine collagen and colostrum supplements at your local Target, all of it is just Western normalcy brought to its natural conclusion. Despite the vibes-driven politics of right-wing health ideology, the reality is that health is not something you can just see, especially on an individual basis. Health is complicated. Body weight is the classic example. It is a very inconsistent indicator of health. And anyone who doesn't fit extremes on either end of the spectrum can essentially fit into all manner of health situations. Even still, just noticing a person's health conditions is not sufficient to diagnose a solution. For all we can say about Maha, we can generally agree that it appears to attempt to solve a real problem. Obesity and chronic diseases are significant issues in the United States. But the answer to such a problem is always assumed to be just a change in diet, a tweaking of food safety and food culture. Just eat different, silly. But as I said at the start of the video, you'd be hard-pressed to find a person who doesn't realize that what you eat is important for your health. This is especially the case given the many TV shows, commercials, movies, and social media posts showing how fat people eat a lot of junk food and how people get fit by changing their diet and exercising more. So why don't all these fat people just do that? In the case of the US at least, obesity is significantly linked to poverty. A 2011 paper by James Levine found that in contrast to international trends, people in America who live in the most poverty-dense counties are those most prone to obesity. Counties with poverty rates of greater than 35% have obesity rates 145% greater than wealthy counties. And there's an observable correlation between obesity in other countries, which generally maps onto higher income populations with obesity in the US, high-calorie, low-nutrition food. Health is complicated, but this particular issue has always been fairly simple. And everyone identifies it, okay? It costs a lot of money to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, the kind of stuff that has much more nutritional value. It takes a lot of time to prepare food at home. And it takes a lot of education to understand how to balance your budget and prepare the food the right way. It is fast and easy to go out and get the cheapest available fast food.
I have been living in Italy for just about 5 years now, and I've been creating content on this app of my life as an American living in Italy for that time. What I will say is this: as much as Americans have the stereotype of being lazy, unhealthy, overweight, and as much as that does obviously exist in the US, Americans can go hard at eating clean, being fit. The health industry in the US is crazy. Where the problem lies, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is that healthy food, fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and things like that, might not be as accessible financially. A lot of times what you find in the US is that a bag of apples will cost more than a bag of candy. Even going to farmers markets in the US can be pretty pricey, honestly. Whereas in Italy, for example, I don't find that to be the case, that healthy food is the same price, if not cheaper, than unhealthy food.
Many Americans live in what we call food deserts, low-income communities for whom local supermarkets are exceedingly distant. When you realize that Black and Latino adults have a higher rate of obesity than white adults, and that Black and Latino adults in the US are also far more often situated in low-income neighborhoods, it becomes clear that this is a massive inequality issue. Again, the misconception that American food is just so unhealthy, you can't find fruits and vegetables here, and that people would rather eat Applebee's instead, ignores how much food diversity exists here. Between all the immigrant communities you can find in your average US city, and all the different rural areas with diverse climates that can thus grow all types of crops. If you have money in the US, you can have as healthy of a diet as humanly possible. But most people don't find the money or the time. The state can begin to address this by lowering the massive subsidies on corn production, as well as dairy and meat production, which are, of course, intrinsically linked, and increasing subsidies on fruit and vegetable production. This could tackle many problems at once: environmental, nutritional, and economic. But the state is beholden to capital, to capitalists, and will do anything to defend them. Capital takes advantage of historical outcomes, like milk production during World War I, to monopolize its power. And then, through massive investments in marketing, lobbying, and business partnership, becomes the market itself, rather than following any supposed rules of the market like supply and demand. Oh, your little supply and demand curve, is that what you think the economy works like? No, it doesn't. And so, instead of cracking down on food monopolies and shaping the economy to meet both cost of living crises, your current administration is pushing you to consume even more cow stuff. Right-wingers, from the center to the extreme, wink, you know who I'm talking about, in both cases, fundamentally cannot address food health issues because food health issues are the results of things that they like: monopoly capital and income inequality. This becomes even clearer when you realize much of what causes chronic health issues from your diet is not just what you eat, it's how you eat. Obesity rates are often correlated with ultra-processed foods, and while we touched on the issues with that categorization, you're not going to get an argument from me that fast food burgers and fries are good for you. You might get that argument from the current administration if you cook said burgers and fries in beef tallow, but not me. But I'm about to break some illusions here. High ultra-processed food consumption is also a reality in countries like the UK and Sweden, countries with their own obesity issues, but nowhere near the levels of the US. Then again, we have way higher income inequality. But my point is, okay, so a significant cause of obesity is chronic stress. Stress responses cause heightened cortisol levels. Heightened cortisol levels increase blood glucose. And that results in insulin level and insulin resistance, which causes an increase in weight gain. Additionally, chronic conditions like PCOS cause insulin resistance. But a culture that emphasizes weight as a health indicator and individual dietary choices as a main cause of weight gain and loss is highly inadequate at addressing the actual causes of malnutrition, and in fact can exacerbate it. The fact is, disordered eating is a normal part of life under this system. Many Americans do not eat breakfast. Some not at all, some not very often. While for some, this dynamic works for their body's fasting and eating rhythm, for many, especially those who have significant physical and mental energy to take on, this is really bad. But who has time to eat breakfast, you know? Who has time and energy left over to take care of their body beyond a mentality of productivity? Who has time to even put food in their stomach before they have a significant amount of caffeine? To research and budget thoughtfully in order to buy a diverse array of groceries, to cook, to eat, and gain nutrients. American food culture is bad, yes, but not because of American exceptionalism or because of the presence of ultra-processed foods, but because of the normalization of disordered eating and hyperproductivity. Thinspiration, including a rising trend of celebrity women quickly losing a shocking amount of weight and looking gaunt, is a reflection of nostalgia, poor health education, and right-wing dominance of celebrity culture. Celebrities are not apolitical, they're right-wing, even when they individually have left-wing beliefs. Culture in celebrity worlds is very right-wing. The same could be said for the obsession with male celebrities getting jacked and ripped at the same time. These bodies are not attained through having a good personality that makes you see that bad food is bad. They're attained through the use of tons of resources, money spent on personal training and personal chefs, and of course, designer drugs, Ozempic usage, steroid usage. With these celebrities being our influencers, slathered with attention and praised by our media systems, they work to normalize destructive ideas of what we should do with our bodies. If I'm a woman skipping meals and losing sleep and putting my body through tons of physical stress, it's fine, because I could stand to lose a few pounds anyway. If I'm a man and I'm not eating meat and dairy and constant high protein concoctions spaced out with a few fancy new protein snacks, then putting my body through rigorous exercise while getting all of my work done, this is a sign I'm actually weak and lazy. And if I speak about my exploitation at the workplace or the rising cost of living, I'm obviously just distracted from my own faults, looking for an excuse. Of course, it's projection, right? It's ironic that this rhetoric is pushed by the right wing because they're the ones coping, looking for quick fixes and easy gotchas. When you realize what you're up against, your own disabilities, your infrastructural issues in your neighborhood, your limited disposable income, you can make decisions that suit your needs and also be okay with supposed imperfections and roadblocks, ultimately never letting these challenges stop you from resting or make you hate yourself. Fascism makes you do the opposite. You can't face your reality, so you can't address it. I don't have to reduce my meat consumption because of climate change and cholesterol. In fact, this guy on Joe Rogan's podcast said I should eat more meat. I should drink organ smoothies from Erewhon. I don't have to stop eating Skittles. I just have to wash off the nasty food dyes. I don't have to stop eating French fries and burgers. I just have to stop eating them from woke restaurants that use woke seed oils. I don't need to add fruits and vegetables and legumes to my diet. I just need to take them in supplements. In fact, I don't even have to take them in supplements. I can just take cow stuff in supplements. More cow stuff. The answer to my problems is just deeper and deeper in the exact same thing that I'm already doing. All of this makes me more like an ancient hunter-gatherer, not at all like a small, stressed modern child. I'm not doing too much. I just need to keep doing more. More vitamin injections, more fad diets, more cow products, more yelling, more screaming, more dying.
Sub to Elliot's page now.
Now.
Sub to Elliot's page now.
Now.
Sub to Elliot.
What?
Sing.
Hey.
Hit that notification. Make it rain.
Rain.
Hey. Let him do his thing.
Let him do his thing.
Get that drop out. We gonna let it bang.
Wait.
Actually, I don't think Elliot is gang affiliated.
Hey.
Elliot is not gang affiliated.
Hey.
But please sub to the Patreon and join the gang.
Gang.
I be outside with my gang.
Gang.
That's my
For $3, you could sub to Elliot's Patreon. Please do it.
Sub to
Please do it. It's a big heart from me. Because I would do it. Please do it.
Like, the problem with, like, Zoink Scoop. Like, the